The rain drummed against the windows of David's small house as he pulled into his driveway. It had been another long day at the engineering firm, debugging software that seemed determined to crash every few hours. All he wanted was a hot dinner, and maybe some mindless television before bed. David grabbed his laptop bag from the passenger seat and jogged toward his front door, keys already in hand. The porch light cast a warm yellow glow across the wet steps, and that's when he saw them. Editorial. First, his tired brain couldn't process what he was looking at. There was something curled up against his door, something that definitely wasn't supposed to be there. David slowed his approach, squinting through the rain. It was a person. No, not quite a person. The figure was small and thin, with skin that seemed to shimmer with a pale green tint even in the dim light. Long, delicate fingers were wrapped around what looked like a bundle of cloth. As David stepped closer, he could see the rise and fall of labored breathing. "Hello?" David called softly, not wanting to startle whoever this was. The figure's head lifted slowly. Large, dark eyes met his, and David felt his breath catch. The face was humanoid, but clearly not human. The features were more angular, with a slight ridge along the forehead and skin that had a subtle scaled texture. Despite the obvious differences, there was something unmistakably feminine about the being, and something desperately sad in those dark eyes. "Please," the alien whispered, her voice rough and barely audible. I cannot go further." David stood frozen for a moment, his mind racing. This was impossible. Aliens didn't exist, or if they did, they certainly didn't show up on suburban doorsteps in the rain. But the evidence was right in front of him, shivering and obviously in distress. "Are you hurt?" David asked, crouching down to her level. Up close, he could see how thin she was, how her strange clothing hung loose on her frame. The alien, woman he decided to think of her, looked down at the bundle in her arms. "Not me," she said, her English heavily accented but understandable. "My child. He needs care. I cannot." Her voice trailed off as she swayed slightly. David realized she was on the verge of collapse. Okay, David said quickly, his natural problem-solving instincts kicking in. "Let's get you inside. Can you stand?" She tried to push herself up, but her arms trembled with the effort. David hesitated for just a moment. This was crazy. This was impossible. This was probably dangerous. But then he saw the bundle move slightly and heard the faintest sound that might have been a whimper. There was a baby in there. Whatever else was happening, there was a baby involved. David slipped his arm under the alien woman's shoulders and helped her to her feet. She was lighter than he'd expected, almost fragile. As they moved toward the door, she clutched the bundle protectively to her chest. "My name is David," he said as he fumbled with his keys. "What's yours?" "Kira," she replied, the name seeming to take effort. David got the door open and guided Kira inside, flipping on the lights as they entered. In the bright illumination of his living room, he could see her more clearly. Her skin definitely had a scaled pattern, though it was subtle, and her hair was a dark color that seemed to shift between black and deep blue. She was wearing what looked like a one-piece garment made of some material he didn't recognize. "Here, sit down," David said, leading her to his couch. "Let me get you some water." As he moved toward the kitchen, Kira spoke again. "I watched you," she said quietly. David paused. "You watched me?" "Through the window. Many times. You feed the small animals. You help the old woman next door with her bags. You are kind." The admission sent a chill down David's spine. How long had she been watching? How had she gotten here? Where had she come from? But those questions could wait. Right now she looked ready to collapse again. David brought her a glass of water and watched as she sipped it carefully. The bundle in her arms stirred, and she looked down with an expression of such tender worry that it made David's chest tight. "Can I see him?" David asked gently. Kira hesitated, then slowly pulled back the cloth. David found himself looking at the tiniest humanoid face he'd ever seen. The baby, Pip, she'd probably call him something like that, had the same scaled skin as his mother, but it was a lighter shade, almost silver. His eyes were closed, but David could see the delicate features, the tiny fingers curled into fists. "He's beautiful," David said, and meant it. Tears began to slide down Kira's cheeks. "I had a ship," she said, her voice breaking. "It crashed, miles from here. I walked for days. No food, no water. I cannot make milk for him anymore. I cannot." She was sobbing now, holding her baby close. David felt something crack open in his chest. He'd never been particularly paternal, had never even thought much about having kids. But looking at this desperate mother and her tiny child, he knew there was only one thing he could do. "It's okay," David said, settling onto the couch beside them. "You're safe now, both of you." Kira looked at him with those large, dark eyes. "You do not understand. I am not like you. My people, we are not welcome among humans. The stories say—" "I don't care what the stories say," David interrupted. "You're here, you need help, and I'm going to help you. That's all that matters. Right now." For the first time since he'd found her, Kira smiled. The next morning, David woke to the sound of soft crying. For a moment, he was confused. Then everything from the night before came rushing back. He'd given Kira his bedroom while he took the couch, and now little Pip was awake and hungry. David knocked gently on the bedroom door. "Kira? Is everything okay?" "He needs food," came her worried voice. "But I have nothing to give him." David had spent half the night on his laptop, researching everything he could find about alien biology. Most of it was science fiction, but he'd found some scientific papers about theoretical non-human life forms. One thing seemed clear. If Kira's people were reptilian, they might need different nutrients than humans. "I have an idea," David called through the door. "Can you come to the kitchen?" When Kira emerged, she looked even more fragile in the morning light. Pip was fussing in her arms, making small chirping sounds that tugged at David's heart. "I read some things online," David said, pulling items from his refrigerator. "Your skin looks like it has scales, so maybe you need minerals that reptiles need. I have some sea salt, and there's a pet store nearby that sells supplements for lizards." Kira watched in amazement as David mixed warm water with sea salt, testing the temperature carefully. "You would do this for us?" "Of course," David said simply. "Here, try a sip first, make sure it's safe." Kira tasted the mixture, and her eyes widened. "It is good. Very good. How did you know?" "Lucky guess," David said, though he was relieved. "It worked. Can you drink this? It might help you make milk for Pip." As Kira sipped the salt water, David watched her color improve slightly. The pale green of her skin seemed to brighten, and she stood a little straighter. "There is more," she said after a few minutes. "The warmth. We need warmth and light." David nodded. "I thought so. I'm going to go shopping. Will you be okay here for a few hours?" Kira clutched Pip closer. "What if someone comes? What if they see us?" "No one will come," David assured her. "But if they do, there's a closet under the stairs. Hide there until I get back." At the hardware store and pet shop, David felt like he was living in a dream. He bought a heat lamp, UV bulbs, mineral supplements, and soft blankets. The store clerk probably thought he was setting up an elaborate terrarium for some exotic pet. When he returned home, he found Kira sitting by the window, holding Pip up to catch the sunlight. The baby seemed more alert now, his tiny eyes open and looking around curiously. "The light helps him," Kira explained. "On my world, the young ones need much light to grow strong." David set up the heat lamp in the living room, creating a warm corner where Kira could sit comfortably. He mixed the mineral supplements into more salt water and watched as Kira's strength continued to return. "Tell me about your world," David said as they sat together that evening. Pip was sleeping peacefully in his mother's arms, his tiny chest rising and falling steadily. "It is called Mira," Kira said softly. Blue seas and red mountains, the cities float on the water, connected by bridges of living coral. It was beautiful. Was? Kira's expression darkened. War came. My people split into two groups, those who wanted to stay isolated, and those who wanted to explore the stars. The fighting grew worse each year. I was a bridge builder, a peacekeeper, but when Pip was born, I knew we had to leave. David was quiet for a moment. That must have been hard. Leaving everything behind. I had a ship, small but fast. I planned to reach the neutral colonies beyond the rim, but something went wrong with the navigation. I ended up here, in your system. The ship crashed in your forests. How long were you walking? 6 days. No food. The emergency supplies were lost in the crash. I grew weaker and my milk dried up. Pip began to fade. Tears gathered in her eyes. I chose your house because I watched you through the windows. You were kind to the small creatures. I hoped you might be kind to us too. David reached over and gently touched Pip's tiny hand. The baby's fingers instinctively curled around his finger, and David felt his heart melt completely. I'm glad you chose my house, he said. Over the next few days, they settled into a routine. David worked from home, telling his boss he had a family emergency. Kira grew stronger each day, and Pip began to thrive under the heat lamp. The baby's scales grew brighter, shifting from silver to a beautiful pale gold. David was amazed by how quickly he adapted to his new housemates. Kira was endlessly curious about human technology, asking questions about everything from the microwave to the television. In return, she taught him words in her language and told him stories about Mira. Your people are remarkable, she said one evening as they watched the news together. So many different kinds of humans, all living on one world. On Mira, we are all the same. But here you have learned to accept difference. Not always, David said honestly. We're still learning. Kira nodded thoughtfully. Perhaps that is why the universe brought me here, to learn from your example. That night, as David lay on the couch listening to Kira sing a lullaby to Pip in her musical language, he realized something had changed in him. His house no longer felt empty. For the first time in years, he felt like he was part of a family. He just hoped they could stay together, because outside the world continued to spin. And David knew that eventually someone would notice the strange energy readings, the unusual purchases, the mysterious house guests. But for now, in this moment, they were safe. They were home. And that was enough. 3 weeks had passed since Kira and Pip had arrived on David's doorstep, and the small house had transformed into something that felt more like home than it ever had before. The living room now had a permanent warm corner, with heat lamps and soft blankets where Pip could play and grow. The kitchen counter was lined with mineral supplements and special salt mixtures. Most importantly, the sounds of family filled the spaces that had once been silent. David sat at his kitchen table, watching Kira teach Pip to hold small objects. The baby had grown remarkably in just 3 weeks. His scales had deepened to a rich golden color, and his dark eyes now tracked movement with sharp intelligence. He could sit up on his own, and was beginning to make sounds that seemed almost like words. He is learning so fast, Kira said with pride, helping Pip stack small blocks that David had bought at a toy store. On Mira, children develop slowly over many seasons, but here, with the good food and warmth, he grows like a flower in spring. David smiled as he watched Pip knock over his tower of blocks and clap his tiny hands in delight. Maybe it's because he's getting the best of both worlds, your care and human vitamins. Over the past weeks, David had become something of an expert in alien childcare. He'd learned that Pip needed both the mineral-rich water that helped Kira and regular human baby formula. The combination seemed to work perfectly. He'd also discovered that Pip loved music, especially the gentle electronic sounds of David's synthesizer keyboard. David, Kira said softly, I must tell you something. Each day I grow more amazed by your people. You have made us part of your life without asking for anything in return. This is not what I was taught about humans. What were you taught? David asked, settling down on the floor beside them. Kira's expression grew serious. The story said, humans were violent, that you took what you wanted and destroyed what you could not use, that you would capture my kind for experiments or worse. But you fixed broken furniture to make Pip a safe place to play. You learned our dietary needs. You sing to him when he cannot sleep. David felt a warmth spread through his chest. Maybe the stories were wrong. Yes, Kira said, watching Pip crawl toward David with obvious affection. Very wrong. That afternoon, while Pip napped under his heat lamp, David worked on his latest project. He'd been designing a special high chair that could accommodate Pip's different body structure, with extra padding and adjustable supports. Kira sat nearby, mending one of Pip's small blankets with careful stitches. You build things, she observed. Not just for work, but for joy. For us. I like solving problems, David said, adjusting a tiny screw. Making things that help people. It's what I've always done, but now it feels more important, Kira smiled. On Mira, we have a word, Kalen. It means one who builds bridges between different worlds. I think you are Kalen, David. Their peaceful afternoon was interrupted by the sound of a car door slamming outside. David looked out the window and felt his blood turn cold. Two people in dark suits were walking up his driveway, and they definitely weren't selling insurance. Kira, take Pip to the closet under the stairs, David said quietly but urgently. Now. Kira didn't ask questions. She scooped up the sleeping baby and disappeared into the hidden space David had prepared for exactly this situation. David quickly turned off the heat lamps and threw a regular blanket over the special corner they'd created. The doorbell rang just as David was hiding the last of the mineral supplements. Mr. Chen? The woman at the door was tall and severe-looking, with short gray hair and eyes like steel. I'm Agent Torres, and this is Agent Park. We're with a government task force investigating unusual energy signatures in this area. David's mouth went dry, but he kept his expression neutral. Energy signatures? Electromagnetic readings that don't match any known human technology, Agent Park explained. He was younger than his partner, with nervous eyes that kept scanning David's porch. Our instruments detected several bursts over the past 3 weeks, all centered on this neighborhood. I haven't noticed anything unusual, David said, leaning casually against his door frame to block their view inside. May we come in and take a look around? Torres asked, though it didn't really sound like a question. Do you have a warrant? David asked politely. The agents exchanged glances. Not yet, Torres admitted. But we could get one. Then I think I'll wait for that, David said. I've been working from home a lot lately, family emergency, so I'd prefer not to have strangers walking through my house right now. Agent Park stepped forward slightly. What kind of family emergency? David's mind raced. My cousin and her baby are staying with me. She's going through a difficult divorce. Very stressful situation. We haven't seen any additional vehicles, Torres noted. She doesn't drive, David said smoothly. Anxiety disorder. I've been doing all the shopping and errands. The agents studied him for a long moment. David forced himself to breathe normally, to keep his hands relaxed at his sides. Mr. Chen, Torres said finally, if you're hiding something, we will find out. These readings suggest possible contact with non-terrestrial entities. That's a matter of national security. Non-terrestrial? David tried to sound confused. Like, aliens, that's crazy. Is it? Park asked quietly. David shrugged. I'm an engineer. I believe in evidence. Show me a little green man and I'll believe in little green men. Torres handed him a card. If you notice anything unusual, anything at all, call us immediately. After the agents left, David waited a full 10 minutes before letting Kira and Pip out of hiding. Kira was pale and Pip was fussing from being woken up suddenly. They know something, Kira whispered. They will return. David nodded grimly. We need help. I can't protect you alone anymore. That evening, David made a decision that would change everything. He picked up his phone and called his old friend Marcus, the one person he trusted completely. Marcus? It's David, I need to tell you something, and you're going to think I'm crazy, but I need your help. The conversation that followed would be the first step in building something bigger than David had ever imagined. A network of people willing to risk everything to protect a scared alien, mother and her remarkable child. Marcus stared at Kira and Pip for a full minute without saying a word. The big man, who had faced combat zones and never flinched, seemed completely stunned. He sat in David's living room, his weathered hands gripping his coffee cup as if it were the only normal thing left in the world. "So," Marcus finally said, his voice carefully controlled, "when you said you had something crazy to tell me, you really meant it." Kira sat in her usual spot under the heat lamp, holding Pip protectively. The baby was now 4 weeks old and had grown noticeably larger. His golden scales caught the light as he looked curiously at the new human. "Marcus, I know this is hard to believe," David began. "Hard to believe?" Marcus let out a short laugh. "David, I've seen a lot of impossible things in my life, but this..." He looked at Kira again. "Ma'am, no offense, but you're definitely not from around here." "None taken," Kira said softly. Her English had improved dramatically over the past month. "I understand your shock. I felt the same when I first saw a human." "Kindness." Marcus leaned forward, studying her face. "Those government agents David told me about, they're not going to give up. I've worked with types like that. They'll be back with more equipment, more questions." "What do we do?" David asked. Marcus was quiet for a moment, thinking. "We need more help. People who can provide different kinds of support." He looked at Kira. "Do you mind if I ask a few friends to meet you? People I trust completely?" Kira glanced at David, who nodded encouragingly. "If David trusts them, then I will try to trust them too." The first person Marcus brought was Elena, David's neighbor from 2 streets over. She was a veterinarian in her 50s with kind eyes and gentle hands. When she first saw Kira, she gasped but quickly composed herself. "Extraordinary," Elena murmured, approaching slowly. "Your bone structure, your skin, it's like nothing I've ever seen, but there are similarities to Earth reptiles." She looked at Pip, who was playing with a set of colorful rings David had made for him. "May I examine the little one? Just basic health checks?" Kira hesitated, then nodded. "He has been healthy, but I worry. I do not know if I am caring for him correctly in this world." Elena's examination was thorough but gentle. Pip seemed to enjoy the attention, grabbing at her stethoscope and making happy chirping sounds. "His heart rate is strong, his reflexes are excellent," Elena reported. "Whatever you're doing, it's working perfectly. But..." She frowned slightly. "There's something unusual about his temperature regulation. He seems to shift between being warm-blooded and cold-blooded depending on the environment." "Is that bad?" David asked, worried. "Not bad, just different. It might actually be an advantage. He can adapt to various conditions." Elena smiled at Kira. "You've raised a remarkable child." The second addition to their group came unexpectedly. Mrs. Chen, no relation to David, despite the name, lived next door and had noticed David's unusual shopping habits and the sounds of a baby in the Mao house. Instead of calling authorities, she knocked on the door one afternoon with a pot of soup. "I know you have visitors," the elderly woman said simply when David answered. "A mother and child who need help. In my country we had a saying, the door that closes to need closes to blessing." When Mrs. Chen met Kira, she didn't even seem surprised. "I have seen many strange things in my long life," she said calmly. "What matters is that you are a mother taking care of your baby. That is universal." She became an invaluable ally, bringing food, baby supplies, and most importantly, serving as a lookout. Her house had a perfect view of David's driveway, and she could spot government agents long before they reached the door. The network's biggest test came on a Tuesday evening when Pip suddenly became ill. He developed a fever and wouldn't eat, lying listlessly in Kira's arms. Kira was frantic, tears streaming down her face. "On Mira, there are healers who understand our biology," she said desperately. "But here, I do not know what to do." Elena arrived within minutes of David's call. She examined Pip carefully while Marcus kept watch outside and Mrs. Chen prepared warm compresses. "His breathing is labored, and his scales are losing their color, Elena observed. Kira, has this happened before? Once, when he was very small, my mother said it was growing sickness when the body changes too fast, but the cure... Kira's voice broke. The cure requires a plant that only grows on Mira. Elena thought quickly. What did the plant do? What was its effect? It helped the body balance its heat and cold. It calmed the changing. Elena's eyes lit up. I might have something. There's an earth plant, willow bark, that has similar properties. Combined with some minerals. She turned to David. Do you still have those supplements we bought? Working. Together, Elena prepared a mixture of willow bark tea with the mineral supplements Kira needed. It was a desperate guess, mixing alien biology with earth medicine, but it was their only option. Slowly, carefully, they gave Pip tiny sips of the mixture. For an hour, nothing happened. Then, gradually, his color began to return. His breathing eased, and he managed to drink some of his usual formula. It's working, Kira whispered, holding her son close. You saved him. You all saved him. That night, as Pip slept peacefully and Kira rested for the first time in days, the four humans sat around David's kitchen table. This changes things, Marcus said quietly. What we've done here, saving his life, it proves something. We're not just hiding aliens anymore. We're building something new, a bridge between our worlds. The government agents will return, Elena added. They're probably getting warrants, bringing more equipment. Mrs. Chen nodded. But now we are ready. We are family. Family protects family. David looked around the table at these unlikely allies, a former soldier, a veterinarian, and a wise grandmother, who had all chosen to risk everything for a scared alien mother and her child. Whatever comes next, David said, we face it together. Outside, unknown to them, Agent Torres sat in an unmarked van watching the house through night vision equipment. She had seen the unusual heat signatures, the people coming and going at odd hours. Tomorrow she would return with a full team. But tonight, inside the warm house, an extraordinary family slept peacefully, protected by bonds that transcended species and worlds. 6 months had passed since that critical night when their small network had saved Pip's life. The baby had grown into a curious toddler who could walk on 2 legs like a human or scamper on all 4s when he wanted to move fast. His scales had deepened to a rich amber color, and his dark eyes sparkled with intelligence that seemed far beyond his months. David sat at his kitchen table, reading the morning news on his tablet while Kira prepared Pip's breakfast, a mixture of human baby food and her special mineral supplements. The routine felt so natural now that it was hard to remember life before them. David, Kira said softly, her voice carrying a note he hadn't heard before. There is something I must tell you. He looked up to see her holding a small device that looked like a crystalline shell. It was glowing with a soft blue light. What is that? A communication beacon, Kira said, her voice trembling slightly. It has been silent since I crashed, but yesterday it began to receive signals. My people, they have found me. David felt his heart sink, though he tried to keep his expression neutral. That's good news, isn't it? You can contact your family. Let them know you're safe. Kira's eyes filled with tears. They are sending a ship. It will arrive in 2 weeks. They want to take me home to Mira. The news hit David like a physical blow. Over the months, he had tried not to think about this moment, but he had always known it might come. Kira had a whole world waiting for her, a civilization, a life beyond his small house. What do you want to do? David asked quietly. Before Kira could answer, the doorbell rang. Marcus's voice called through the door. David, we need to talk, now. When David opened the door, he found not just Marcus, but Elena, Mrs. Chen, and 3 people he didn't recognize, a woman in a business suit, a man with graying hair, and a younger woman with a press badge. This is Sarah Martinez, Marcus said quickly. She's an immigration lawyer who specializes in unusual cases. This is Dr. Robert Hayes from the University, Xenobiology Department. And this is Jane Kim, a journalist who's been investigating government cover-ups of alien encounters. David stared at them. How did you— Word spreads, Elena said with a small smile. Quietly, but it spreads. There are more people willing to help than you might think. Sarah Martinez stepped forward. Mr. Chen, we understand you've been providing sanctuary for extraterrestrial refugees. We're here to help make that official. Official? David repeated. Dr. Hayes nodded enthusiastically. There have been quiet contacts with alien species for years, but always handled through military channels. What you've done here? Civilian first contact based on humanitarian principles? It's revolutionary. Jane Kim pulled out a small recorder. The public has a right to know that first contact doesn't have to mean invasion or conflict. It can mean family. As if summoned by the word family, Pip came toddling into the room, followed by Kira. The sight of the alien mother and child caused a moment of awed silence among the newcomers. Extraordinary, Dr. Hayes whispered. The bone structure, the scales, the way he moves. It's like nothing in our evolutionary tree, but he's so clearly a child, so obviously loved. Pip, unbothered by the attention, walked directly to David and held up his arms to be picked up. As David lifted the toddler, Pip babbled something in a mixture of Kira's language and English. Data home. Data home. The room fell completely silent. He calls you father, Sarah Martinez said softly. David looked at Kira, who was crying openly now. David has been more than father, she said. He has been everything. Teacher, protector, family, and all of you. She looked around the room. You have shown me that humans are not the violent conquerors we were told about. You are builders of bridges. Jane Kim leaned forward. What if you didn't have to choose between worlds? What if we could create a place where both worlds could meet? Over the next week, something unprecedented began to take shape. Sarah Martinez worked with international law experts to create a new category of refugee status. Dr. Hayes connected with scientists around the world who had been secretly hoping for peaceful alien contact. Jane Kim's carefully written articles began to shift public opinion, focusing on the image of a mother protecting her child rather than alien invasion fears. Most importantly, when Kira's people arrived in their sleek silver ship, they didn't find a primitive world holding their citizen captive. They found a delegation of humans waiting to welcome them as honored guests. The meeting took place in David's backyard, which had been transformed into a neutral meeting ground. Kira stood between her people and her human family, translating not just words but cultures. They want to take you home, David said after the formal greetings were finished. Kira looked at her ship commander, then at David, then at Pip, who was playing with a toy Marcus had carved for him. I told them that I am already home. The negotiations that followed were unlike anything in human history. Instead of government officials and military leaders, the discussions were led by a small-town engineer, a veterinarian, a grandmother, and a former soldier who had learned that the best battles are fought with kindness rather than weapons. 6 months later, David's house had become something unprecedented. The first official human-alien cultural exchange center. Kira served as the first ambassador, while Pip grew up speaking 3 languages and serving as a living symbol that differences could be bridges rather than barriers. Other lost ships began to find their way to Earth, drawn by stories of the human who opened his door to strangers. David's neighborhood became a haven where beings from different worlds could find refuge, understanding, and most importantly, family. As David watched Pip teach a newly arrived alien child how to play with building blocks, he realized that the scared, desperate mother he had found on his doorstep had given him far more than he had given her. She had shown him that home wasn't a place. It was the people you chose to love, regardless of what world they came from. The stars no longer seemed distant and cold. They were full of possibilities, full of families waiting to be formed, full of bridges waiting to be built by those brave enough to open their doors to the unknown.